I'd like to catch up on everything that we covered, but I think we ought to jump in to see what we've each seen over the last weekend. So, over the last week, I cannot believe. So, anyway, so to begin topic,
Yep.
immigration forum. Um, I just last week I can't believe we missed that Biden was going to be over. They'd already announced that he was going to be in El Paso, but we didn't cover it at all.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so now that it's happened, somebody was asking me about why it was significant and whatever else, and I realized that I had not processed it for the other implications. On the Mexican side, the president is hasn't been exactly helpful. He says, or at least his spokesman says, that there's no quid pro quo uh, on why Mexico is taking in people or retaining them, however you want to do it. But why not take money from the Americans? You know, I'll help you solve your problem. It's kind of like the Reagan years, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a problem with the leftist government. We'll sell the arms in Iran. You know, all that little circle of, but we didn't do it,
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. So I imagine in a few years the deal will come to light as to how and why the Mexican government is helping out the U.S. president. Uh, in any case, Biden was going to show up, so there was a lot of noise during the week as to what's going on. I found it educational. I found a couple of good articles about both the expansion and the success of the Venezuelan, what do they call it, parole, expansion of parole.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we ought to summarize it and then give our reactions. What do you guys think?
Well, and of course now Cuba, Nicaragua, and Haiti have been added.
Right. But
Yeah.
the effort seems, at first it seemed just logical, except that the buildup is there. I had not realized that there was a parole for Venezuelans that was, I have the app, by the way, I've used it, that the government then provides a orderly way to apply for this benefit. It happened with Venezuelans, 2-3 months ago? So they apply through the app, and then if they get, and they document themselves, and if they get approved, then they can come to the U.S. In batches. I'm not sure how to think of that. And that had dropped the number of Venezuelans showing up at the border significantly. I forget what it was, but it was like 70% or 80%. And that therefore then, with Biden showing up at the border, they announced that now they were going to run the same program with Haitians and Cubans, which they expect then to drop the number of people showing up at the border because now they have an orderly way. Did I miss anything on the summary?
That sounds right to me.
Okay. So I think we can come back to Title 42 in a bit, given that this is officially under another executive, not privilege, but obligation, or within the freedom of the executive's order to do what it can at the border.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they haven't made up new laws. They were extending or changing the numbers within their prerogative, because they did increase the number of parolees, I think, which doesn't sound unreasonable given that they ought to have latitude on how many people get admitted into that. I am unsure though of the details of what happens. They have to have a economic sponsor in the U.S. they need to have their paperwork and background check. I forget what the other one was.
Well, I know with the Venezuelans, they have to fly in, which means they have to have a visa or passport already.
That's right. So they have to have enough paperwork to come to do, which of course, at least from my experience in Mexico and other places, who has a passport? Even in the U.S., who has a passport?
I have an expired one.
There you go. But it's not the plumber. It's not the farmer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a negative. Well, basically, one of the arguments I saw from an advocacy group saying you may be inviting people to come in an orderly way, but maybe it's not the people that need it.
Yeah, that's my concern.
Yeah.
So a counter to that argument, or at least to that, to highlighting that problem, is that already, a byproduct of this is that up to 60% of the people that they caught at the border were Mexican, and they could be turned back under the rules. But I kept thinking of this: how much does it cost? How much does an airplane ticket cost to get to the U.S. Versus how much it costs for you to pay a coyote?
Yeah, I've thought of the same thing.
Yeah. And so I don't know what the price is right now, but it is certainly more than $5,000.
Mm-hmm.
And there's very few airplane tickets
That are that expensive.
So if I'm a farmer and I borrow to get to the U.S. with a coyote for $5,000, granted they don't have to pay it all at once. You know, usually I was just talking to somebody who was needing help because they had come to Texas, but they needed to be essentially rescued out of their Texas landing spot because they had paid enough. They had paid the down payment, but now they needed to pay the balance in order to be let go. But it's okay in that the argument still holds. If somebody can afford to pay a coyote, they can certainly pay to get an airplane ticket.
Right.
Right.
But to fly, they also need the visa.
That's right. They also need a visa. In order to get a visa, they need a substantial amount of money in the bank. So I think they need a passport. I don't know if they need a visa.
Okay, yeah, passport. Yeah.
Right. The visa is actually would be what they would need to get in anyway, which they can't often. Especially they cannot get a visa if the U.S. doesn't have relations with that country.
Yeah.
Which would be Cuba and Venezuela.
Right.
The Haitians is a different case, and I'm not
Nicaragua,
sure.
probably.
Oh yeah, Nicaragua gets put into this spot too. Yeah. So anyway, if that's the summary, and we agree that that's our understanding, what do you think? What else is up with that? And then we can jump on to 42 section title 42.
Well, my first impression is one of sort of pity for everybody involved in this, because on the one side you have the immigration folks who, as bureaucrats, the very essence of their job is to turn everything into an official process. That's just what they do. So you can't do anything in Western culture officially without paperwork. And so there has to be some kind of paperwork so you can identify who this person is, what is their history, what is this thing about them. You know, these things are all like necessary for the bureaucratic mind in order to establish identity, purpose, and so on. So in one sense, I don't see how else they could have done it in terms of just what do we, in doing our job, what do we do? How do we do it? You can't just say, well, you just come and we'll just figure it out when you get here, because that's that's the antithesis of what bureaucracy is all about. So you have that on one hand, and then on the other hand, like you say, there are so many people who are cut out of that because they don't have that paperwork, and they're not going to have it. They may not even know how to get it. It may be available to them. They may have the money to buy it or do it, but they don't know how to do it, and they don't have any real understanding of that process. So they're screwed, basically. They can't participate in this. So it's just going to be the usual suspects of people who have the means, have the education, have the knowledge, who can take advantage of this. And like you said, it's going to leave out a huge chunk of people who just can't do it that way for whatever reason. They just can't do it that way. But what else do you do? How else do you do it? I don't know. So that's my impression.
Do you think, Caroline, any other thoughts as to who gets included and who doesn't?
Yeah, I mean,
Your questions?
this is, kind of a repetition of what you guys have already said, but it just seems like the people with the most need probably are getting left out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not to challenge you, but to complement that, the people that most need it can be defined in several ways. There's an economic need,
Mm-hmm.
If you're out in the farm, but there's also a political need.
Yeah.
And usually the farmers are not the ones in political exile.
Mm-hmm.
It's from middle class and up that
Mm.
in any country, they're educated enough and they're unkillable in that they can get rid of farmers and that village is going to know but few people. But if it is an anti-government newspaper editor that gets killed, the government has to tiptoe around that. But they can make threats and make life difficult. And so those people, when I was in Moscow, Valentina and she took me to the I don't know if it was a refugee, but it was an immigration concentration place. And it was the time that the Russia had taken Crimea.
Mm-hmm.
And so the ethnic Russians that lived in Ukraine were very much aware that because they were Russians in Ukraine, that life was going to be more difficult given that Russia had just invaded Ukraine. So it was a lot of bureaucrats, teachers, policemen, people that were Russian, but they were the children of Russians. They had moved into Ukraine. Their parents had immigrated just as the Soviet bloc was working.
Mm-hmm.
And so, at least from what I could tell, out of hundreds of people around there, and we talked to several, there were no farmers. There were no poor people.
Mm-hmm.
They were middle class. And the middle class could look ahead and see that things were going to get worse. So they're the ones that wanted to leave Ukraine.
Right.
I would imagine in Venezuela or Nicaragua, the same thing happens. It's that middle class that has an opinion that is most dangerous to the government. And therefore, they need it too, in political terms versus economic terms. What do you think of that?
I agree with you.
And since we can't take all the Venezuelans, then taking a portion of them through this method is a functioning compassion.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Okay. So then, I'm validating what you said about the bureaucrats.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think my point was that a huge portion of people is not going to come. Not necessarily that all the people who need it can't come, but just a huge portion of the people that need it can't come. That was my point, really. But yeah, I totally agree with you that that's another way to look at it and an important way to look at it, because that is also true. And it can be argued from the anti-immigration side that what we want here are people who will add materially to the strength of the country and so on and
There
so
you go.
forth.
So there's another plus, another pro
Mm-hmm.
argument to what they're doing. I think, and I should look it up and bring it on screen. I forget how many uh, people they were going to bring per month, but it seemed to me like it was a high number.
Hmm.
I'll look it up in just a minute, but I was surprised that at least I felt like the number was not a shabby number that they wanted to recruit. I'll look it up now.
Don't you suppose, though, that the usual suspects are going to come out and like try to, take it to court and stop this from happening?
No question. The far right will fight anything. They want
Mhm.
the borders closed. And then their lawyers will say, well, you can't close the border, but you can close it to these people in this way.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, but I think that's a given. I'm trying to get into New York Times because I think that's where my article was. But of course, I forgot my password. So
I can get in through the library if you can tell me what the specifics are to search on.
it was actually the article on Sunday that says
Okay.
announcements by President Biden at the El Paso, and then they describe the program.
Hmm.
I'll look to see whether it's actually in the Post, in the Washington Post, but I will find it too. While we each look at that, I think because this overlaps with 42, I think we should summarize. I was surprised. So the Biden people have tried since early in the administration to have tried to stop using Title 42 as an excuse to turn people at the border.
Right.
Apparently, they eventually got to the point where they could untrigger it. But my learning over the last weekend has been that already the numbers of people being claimed within Title 42 had been going down. And that's where I learned the tidbit that 60% of those trying to not be turned at the border were actually Mexican.
Hmm.
And it's very easy to turn down Mexicans and push them back across the border. One, Mexico can't say no because they're Mexican citizens. And two, it's just right there. It's easy to. The second bit of that was that the Biden administration has taken the opportunity of turning down Mexicans by applying what has been a federal law for a long time, and that is you can get caught the first time and you get turned away. If you get caught the second time, then you are incurring then the law that says that you broke your agreement not to come back, and that is criminal, and you get charged. I think it's 2 months in jail with a $400,000 fine, or maybe it's 4 months in jail with a $200,000 fine. But essentially, now you are a criminal, and now you can be put in prison for having come back a second time.
Yeah.
And so they've elevated or they've augmented those prosecutions such that they want to use it as a deterrent not to come back, or at least the deterrent to not get caught, because there are more consequences. What else can we say about Title 42?
God, that's just bounced back and forth so many times. I'm not even like entirely 100% sure where we're at with that right now. Is it?
I think we're stuck with it at least through February.
Because the bill that they were pushing that included that language in it didn't go anywhere, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So.
And the court already said that it has to stay in place. Maybe it's until March, Caroline. Maybe that's what you had read.
Okay. I mean, all in all, if one steps back and looks at it realistically, sans all the rhetoric on all different sides, it the U.S. makes it its business to try to limit the number of people that comes in, and there are pushes in various directions to limit where those people come from. Some people would like them to only be, like Trump was explicit about it. He only wanted, people from Northern European countries or something to come
Norway
here.
specifically, yes.
Yeah, but generally, there a lot of where the pushing and shoving comes from is deciding, crafting the laws and regulations to kind of control who gets to come in. But all in all sides seem to be sort of generally resistant to the idea of getting a lot of people coming from the southern hemisphere up to here from there. And it doesn't matter Republican or Democrat or independent or whoever, that seems to be the case across the board. And it's just mostly depends, what we hear about it mostly depends on the rhetoric, how they describe what they're doing, whether they admit what they're doing, and how they frame it.
Yeah. Well, I think you and us are not the only ones confused with these things going back, and that framing is maybe engineered.
Mm-hmm.
That is, we are to be confused because they want to do whatever they want to do, or there could be a conspiracy part of that, but there's also the wear and tear.
Mm-hmm.
We've heard about it long enough that we don't know whether the eclipse was yesterday, it's going to be tomorrow, it's happening right now. And I want to share this article with you because I thought it was clever. Let me see if I can pick this one. Yeah, the headline will show. Because I think we had, I had certainly missed this. I don't know if you'd seen this one, but while you were concentrated on this, something else is happening. And so this article basically says, this is the governor of Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out he was busing people too.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. But of course, we're concentrated with the other two states for the presidential wannabes. So anyway, it was a trio of governors, of Republican governors.
Mm-hmm.
So he wanted his fair share of the the headlines. But look at this line here at the top. For what it's worth, he capitulated on Saturday. That is, he is no longer supporting sending buses.
Mm-hmm.
So he says now that the state is working with culturally competent navigators.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I glanced at this article earlier and I noticed this same thing. I didn't read it in depth, but
so just I think for me it's more of an angled article. Just don't a lot of stuff is going on and only certain ones get to the headlines.
mm-hmm.
But when they interview one particular guy, it's only one slice of what's happening. And there we are. If it's not a correction, I think for me, yes, the percentage of immigrants 100 years ago was higher, but the number of immigrants is at an all-time record, or at least crossing the border. We should not, let's be fair in our reporting. So, what else? Did you find your article, Carolyn?
I didn't find a New York Times, but found 3 others that I just sent to you guys via email.
Hmm.
One from Wall Street Journal, one from Washington Post, and then one on Title 42 from I forget who it was from. It was from, oh, that was also Wall Street Journal.
Okay. I don't get the Wall Street Journal, and when I try to access it, it only gives me one paragraph, and then it says pay up.
Mhm.
Oh, well, yeah, that's how I get with the New York Times. But I'm doing it through the library, through ProQuest.
Hmm.
Because the library has a subscription, I can access it for free because I have a library card.
Mhm.
Yeah, which means everybody that has a library card could do
Mhm.
that.
But a lot of people, I guess, don't know about it. Yeah, the libraries have all kinds of interesting databases available. And
So,
I use this one all the time when I worked at the News Gazette. So yeah.
well, I think the public ought to know that this is a reality. And in this case, you are able to email us the articles, which is
Mhm.
one way that
Mhm.
I have become. You're like my Axios companion. When you
Mhm.
send me this, you catch other things that maybe I hadn't seen in Axios. So,
No, I have not read these yet. I saw them and just in the moment sent them to you because they were apropos to our discussion. But
yeah, I think that at least as I do a quick read on this, they all got the same speaking points, which rightfully the administration would circulate, and the reporter can rewrite. Uh, yeah, well, that's what it is. Um, I'll pick up another one of these, but they do remind me that it's about. Nope.
oh, did I send a wrong one?
No. I think it was most news and stuff go to one section of my
Got it.
mail. So actually, so the three amigos met, and immigration is part of their thing. But on the Mexican side, the president, at least the newspapers I read from Mexico, when I get to them, they're usually very unfriendly towards the president,
Hmm.
towards their president. And in this case, they just keep on hammering him for saying he doesn't want anything to do. He basically wants to derail everything. Uh,
Oh,
that, yeah, but that doesn't help the poor in Mexico. That's his angle all the time when he speaks. Um, and so in this case, he would normally be against meeting with President Biden about things, but again, he does show up um, to a meeting on immigration. So nobody knows for sure what he's getting out of it, but since it's out of character with his regular rhetoric, uh, something's going on.